exciting times. And so, well, we're continuing our series on the 10 Commandments. We are going to be officially halfway through after tonight because we're talking about the 5th commandment. And the 5th commandment is honor our father and mother. And so, now, as much as you want to nudge the 8th going on 9th grader, this applies to all of us, even if your parents have passed away. Because it does not say obey, it says honor. And we're going to talk about what exactly that means. Now, there is a slight difference in Exodus 20:12 and Deuteronomy 5:16, yet the command remains the same. The difference is the blessing that comes with obeying the command. I highlighted the differences in italics. You can see Exodus 20:12 says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. And then Deuteronomy 5:16, honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be long and that it may be well with you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. So these differences can help us somewhat to understand what's being commanded. Here, more of understanding what's going on in both the situations. The first difference in the command comes from the inclusion of the phrase, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Now, we talked about that last week as well with the 4th commandment. We see this inclusion of this phrase, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Does someone remember the reasons why I said that phrase was included for the 4th commandment? Anyone? First one is as just a reminder of, in Deuteronomy, when that's being said, it's a reminder back of they're being told, this has already been commanded of you. It's a reminder again of how the 10 Commandments have already been given. The other reason is potentially because the command was difficult to obey. Now, let's set that context a little bit for when Deuteronomy is given. Do we remember when Deuteronomy is given? When Moses preaches this sermon? Before they go into the promised land. What did they just do before getting to go into the promised land? They wandered for 40 years. Why did they wander for 40 years?
Because they were exiled.
Disobedience.
They turned on God, worshiping the Egyptian gods.
Things of those natures. They failed to obey God. They were a wicked generation. But God chose not to kill them all. Would God have been just to kill all of them?
Yeah, because he said he'd just start all over with Moses.
But he didn't. So they had to wander. They were at Sinai in Exodus 20. They leave Sinai. They act wickedly. And they have to wander. They just have to walk around the wilderness. They have to drift aimlessly because of their wickedness. And they have to do it for 40 years because the entire older generation has to die out. And so that way the younger generation would become the new leaders of it. So let's put yourself in those shoes. You're 17 years old. You're about to, you come out. You didn't worship like your parents did. You see that your parents did that, and now, instead of you getting to go into the promised land, having land of your own, getting to grow crops, you have to wander around a wilderness for 40 years, from 17 until you're 57. How do you feel about your parents? Mad. Annoyed. I could see some difficulty in honoring my parents if they did that kind of stupid thing. Yet the command is still given. I think that's part of why this redundancy of saying, as the Lord your God commanded, is to show, hey, yes, your parents did it really wrong. You still have to honor them. That command is still there. And I think that's a key point in understanding this passage, understanding that difference is honoring your father and your mother has nothing to do with the honorability of the father and the mother. And so we see that difference there. We aren't given any examples of disobeying the command, but I think that it is possible that it would be difficult. Now, I'd also add in the difference, if anything, puts emphasis as important as this is as important as keeping the command of the Sabbath, which is obviously very important to Israel. The emphasis there is this matters. This command matters a lot. Now, the other thing with this command as well is we're moving to what's referred to as the second tablet of the commands. And so, the first tablet are all what are called vertical commands. That makes sense? All four are in relationship to God. You worship one God, you don't have idols, you don't take his name in vain, and you keep the day that he made holy. That's all vertical in relation to him. Now we have these horizontal commands of how we treat each other. And this is the first one, and I think that's also a needed emphasis of honoring your parents is a very big aspect of being able to obey all of the horizontal commands of how we treat each other. So, big emphasis there. The next difference is the extending of the blessing not only to long life, but a long life where it is well in the land. Not only would someone live long, but they live a happy life if they kept the fifth commandment. Now, that is talking about the land as in Israel. So, just to note that, we'll touch on it. That promise is very specific. Has God promised any of us land?
Technically, because of the promised land.
But it's not to us. We're not Israel. Us. So there's nowhere in Scripture where you'll find where it says you're supposed to have 10 acres of land somewhere in Tennessee.
Thank goodness.
There's no place where that promise is given. So when we're understanding the blessings, it's very Israel-centric on that. Yet we see in the New Testament to where there is a application of that blessing, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, to understand the command, it's also important to understand the word honor, which in Hebrew is the word kabed. The word has a large semantic range, and actually its primary meaning is heavy. Something to be heavy. If I said that person's opinion carries a lot of weight, am I saying something positive or negative about their opinion?
Could go either way.
Generally, you think it being positive,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
there is the other aspect of it as well.
You could have it negative in you mean it of their opinion carries a lot of weight and I wish it didn't. But typically what we mean is that person's opinion matters. That's kind of the idea. There's a weightiness in honor, and that weightiness is supposed to be applied to parents. There's supposed to be, there's importance. There's a degree of importance. It has the concept of respect, dignity, and even glory. Now, the word does not carry with it the concept of obey. This is an important distinction. Now, there are applications where honoring means to obey, but not every instance of honoring means you must obey. And that's going to be determined by situation, age, and relationship. Now, also in this, interestingly, both father and mother are mentioned, showing equality among the parents in deserving of honor. One parent was not more worthy of honor than the other. So we go back, and people want to claim that we used to live in a misogynistic, patriarchal culture where women were never treated with any dignity or respect. History begs to differ on that one, but we do have that claim made by our modern feminist culture that says that the mother and wives and women were just never treated with any degree of respect. Here we see that's not the case. Mothers are equal with the fathers. Our culture also tends to have a degree of we show more honor to mothers than we do fathers now. My parents had one rule about watching kid shows when I was growing up. One rule. They were not strict about it. They didn't, at my time growing up as well, y'all's time probably too, you weren't being indoctrinated with a bunch of craziness. But generally, like at that time, it was stuff of just good, funny stuff. But they had one rule, and that one rule was we couldn't watch something where the dad was a bumbling idiot. Think about some of the kid shows that really came out late 90s or early 2010s, whether animated or live. The dad was always the punchline of he's just the doofus dad and the mom holds everything together. That's how our culture tends to look at dads. We look at dads as the plus one parent. As long as a child has the mother, he's good. She's good. Having a father's an add-on. But if it's just the father, that kid's in for a rough life. That's how our culture perceives fathers. There's not honor given to the father. Scripture gives honor to both. Both are equally deserving of honor. We actually see in this as well that equality of honor. In Leviticus 19:3, this command is repeated, but it actually places the mother first instead of the father. And that demonstrates this equality. It's interchangeable. It's not show honor to the father and then the mother, or show honor to the mother, then the father. It's show honor to both of them. And so it's worthwhile to note that as well as this command does not come with the caveat of having dishonorable parents. We don't see unless they did this, unless they did that. Always command to honor. How that looks in application can be different, but always honor. Also worth noting is that this is the only command given that has a promise attached to it. And that command, as I mentioned, that promise I mentioned is very Israel-centric. It has to do with the promised land that they're about to enter. And there's so much in it. Interestingly with that as well is this isn't given in the negative form. It's not honor your father and mother, or you won't live long in the land and you won't do well. It's a positive, not a negative. So there's not a punishment. What that means is not every person who live long lives and do well honor their parents. It's not a one-to-one like that. But those who honor their parents would live long and do well. That makes sense of that distinction there? There's not a punishment, there's just a blessing with it. Now there are punishments that we see in the Old Testament for failing to keep this command, but here the focus is on that positive. And so that's our general context of the main things around it. Before we move into how Israel would apply this, any questions on this? Make sense? All good? All right. Well, the application for Israel would simply mean to hold their parents in high regard, respecting them and valuing them. This first meant how they spoke to them. Exodus 21:17 and Leviticus 29 command that no one can curse their parents. If they curse their parents, they are to be put to death. Now, cursing does not have to do with specific words, but with intentions. And so, the first thing was, honoring meant you needed to talk a certain way to your parents.
Makes sense.
It's one of the main places where honor is shown. And so, with that, we want to really understand that they weren't to curse. And with us, we think of cursing as just telling someone off and saying something bad to them. And this time, a curse would be, I call on God to destroy your crops. Like, much more superstitious. If someone came up to you, if one of your kids went, I hope God destroys your crops, you just look at them funny. Like we don't think that way today, but that's how they would have thought then. So really that curse is, I hope bad things happen to you. I hope that's the concept of cursing. Then further, no one is permitted to attack their parents, as Exodus 21:15 commands. Now, this would likely exclude self-defense, as Scripture always gives a ability of someone who is being harmed to defend themselves, but it could not be retaliation, and it could not be even just attacking. You can't strike your parents. It was actually really funny this morning. Liam said, you can't hit your parents. And like that sounded like Alan was kind of like that. These are some specific things that you're talking about that are sin. And actually I was thinking, I'm going to teach on this tonight. And actually that's a command. Children are not to hit their parents. This really applies more so to like older grown-up children or even adult children of how they interact with their parents. They're not supposed to, a son isn't supposed to have a fist fight with his dad. Like that's the concept there. I don't think necessarily they're having a 6-year-old throwing a temper tantrum, hitting the parent in mind when talking about them, because the punishment for doing so is death as well. So I don't think they're thinking that for a 6-year-old, but for an adult, where an adult cannot strike. And really we see that one as just kind of self-evident of something that you just shouldn't do, no matter how bad it is. I heard a story of a guy talking about how like he got mad and he just hit his dad, and he was like, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And like that's like a big thing. Like that's not ever supposed to be the case. No matter what, like that honoring means that, especially for men especially, there comes a point in every man's life when they become stronger than their dad. And I think every man is scared of that point in time of when they become stronger than their dad. I honestly, in my brain, my dad could still whoop me. Like, that's how my perception of my dad is. If I learned that I could actually take my dad in a fight, I would be, like, that would harm my perception of my dad. And so, like, even in there, there is no striking of the parents, mother or father. For children still living in the household, honoring meant the child could not be stubborn and rebellious, as Deuteronomy 21:18-21 commands. This passage commands parents who have a rebellious and stubborn son to have the community stone him to death. The passage describes what stubborn and rebellious means, as what it means is a son who is told by the mother or the father to do something. He refuses to do it. When he is chastised, when he is disciplined, he still refuses to do it. And likely it would involve a repetition in normal behavior. If someone was like that, they were to be stoned to death. There was not honoring meant for a child still living in the home. They had to obey. They had to heed the commands, and they had to submit to the discipline given. And so, children aren't always perfect. They sometimes are going to disobey. But there is a big problem when discipline doesn't correct the behavior. And so that's what is happening. Honor involves obeying. When failing to obey, heeding the discipline. And so honoring parents would also extend to taking care of the parents in their old age, especially widows. And then as well of heeding advice and not despising your parents, as Proverbs commands. And then there would also be cultural aspects of honor involved, such as seats of honors and things like that aren't necessarily laid out in Scripture. But all those things, there is this holistic honor of parents. Does that make sense? Any thoughts or questions on that? So the application for us is very similar. We are to honor our parents. For children, our culture puts that pretty much as anyone under the age of 18. That means obeying your parents. For children, if your father or mother says to do something, you do it. You don't question it, you do it. Now, as odd as our culture is, did you know that there are people who will say children are an oppressed class and they're oppressed by their parents? That's a thing. There are people who will say because children have to obey their parents, they are oppressed by their parents.
That makes no sense.
No, it does not. Keep that in mind. You're going to be exposed to more of this nonsense the older you get. That's actually a thing. And so with it, there's this view, and this is kind of the view of any time there's any kind of authority. But when do I get to disobey it? And so like literally, like if you're at a youth conference, I've been to the ones where someone went, when am I allowed to disobey my parents? Like that's what every kid wants to know. When am I allowed to? Well, never. Unless you're actively being told to sin, never. Even if you think it's the wrong way to do it. Even if you think it's a bad way to do it. Even if you don't want to do it. You're to do it. The protection for children is not having a carved out time when they're allowed to disobey their parents. The protection for children is, we see in Ephesians, parents aren't to exasperate their children. The protection for children in the command to obey their parents is not that they are able to sometimes disobey their parents. The protection for them is parents should make it to where not everything they say to their child is a command. They shouldn't exasperate that heavy. Growing up, for me, my dad, I remember the conversation with my dad. I was in high school, and my dad delineated it this way. He went, if I ask you a question, you're allowed to say no. If I tell you to do something, you have to do it. That was the difference. And I'm of that persuasion. If you ask someone a question, you're always allowed to say no. If you want someone to do something, you tell them to do it and make sure you have the authority to actually tell them to do it. But if you're going to ask someone a question, you have to be willing for them to say no. And so my dad told me that I'm 10th grade. He wants to go watch a baseball game. He's like, do you want to come with me? And I had the ability to say no. My dad just wanted to spend time with me. That's not in that situation, my dad was not looking to force me to do something that I did not want to do. But there was also times when my dad said, you're going to this fair with me. I was like, okay. I got into the truck and went with it. That's the idea of the protection for children is parents don't exasperate them, but children, honoring means always obey. No matter what it is, unless it is actively telling you to sin, obey. Because that's the duty. Now, for adults, honoring looks different because it does not include obedience. You're an adult. You're responsible for your own decisions. If you're married, That's a new family. I think the worst thing that's anyone ever says at a wedding is they say to the bride or the groom, "Welcome to the family." That's not right. They just formed a new family. And the head of that household is the husband, not his dad. And certainly not her mom. You can not heed their commands when you're an adult. You still have to honor them. And that can be a fine line, but it doesn't always mean obedience. And so with that, that kind of is pushing against our culture a lot. Now, if we were talking in Eastern culture that puts a high value on people who are older as having inherent authority no matter how old you are, the conversation of how this applied would be different. But for our culture, what we value is independence from parents. To the point that anything looking like your parents, being involved in your life, guiding you, or even expecting honor is seen as demeaning. You turn 18, you're out of the house. You get to do whatever you want. Your parents don't get to tell you what to do. They don't get any part of your life. You get to choose if they're in your life or not. That's what our culture has deemed is the relationship between child and parent. Immediately it has to be rejected. Parent involvement is a good thing, and honoring them means having that involvement. Now, wisdom is necessary because if you don't have saved parents, if there's a reason why your parents might not be the best source for everything, you don't have to obey them, but the outright, I'm disconnected, if you don't meet me on my terms, then we're not going to have a relationship. We see this all the time. One of the saddest things that I've seen is people on social media bragging about breaking their relationship with their parents over who they voted for. Like, it's ridiculous. That's not honor.
That is stupid.
Stupid.
And
Amen.
ridiculous.
And ridiculous. Facts. All true. And so we want to go away from that culture. We can't treat our parents this way. Our parents still have the right to be listened to. Your parents, if they're still alive, still have the right to have an opinion on your life. You don't have to listen to their opinion, but they still care about you. And honoring them means listening to them. And they oftentimes know more than you. I found this out, and there is this moment in high school for me where I just thought that my dad didn't know anything. I'm sure none of you have ever been there. And I just went, I'm just gonna look into and challenge everything my dad believes. Now, my dad being a pastor and in ministry, and me wanting to, all that revolved around theology and ministry perspectives. And so I'm just looking at everything, challenging everything. And what I found is 90% of the things my dad was right on. Like, there's some things that I have like some disagreements with my dad, but like 90% of what my dad said was right. There's a moment in time when I was like, well, maybe alcohol's okay. And now I'm like, I hate alcohol. Y'all, like, I'm planning on doing preaching Proverbs for a little bit after we finish 1 Corinthians. Y'all are going to see my disdain for alcohol come out in that sermon. It is heavy. I don't believe there's anything good in it. Well, the reason why is because my dad taught me that as a kid, because he did dumb things in his youth before he was a Christian. And I got told those stories. So there was a time I doubted him, but this need to honor my dad, because that was instilled in me, kept me from ever going and drinking. I honored him enough to go, I would be disrespecting him by partaking in this. That alone kept me from partaking. And now I come to go and go, studied enough and go, yep, my dad's right on that one. And a lot of times that's how we just think parents, they don't know They don't know anything. They just don't get it. They're outdated. A lot of times they know what they're talking about. Not always. Some parents can get disconnected. Every now and then my dad tells me something. I'm like, Dad, you gotta stop watching that news channel. That's not accurate information. But for the most part, we still listen and we honor. And then when we do disagree, we show honor. I don't have to try and make my dad feel like an idiot anytime I think he's wrong. I think that's one of the things that a lot of, like, for some reason, especially among Gen Z, there's this desire of, when my parent is wrong, I gotta make them feel stupid. I gotta make them feel like they're the dumbest person alive. I was like, we don't need to do that. Honor is when our parent is wrong about something, we lovingly and carefully, hey, this is why this is wrong. Especially if it's something dangerous for them. And sometimes that is involved. Sometimes when you're dealing with parents, if you have to go, no, a Nigerian prince did not email you wanting to give you $1 million. That's a scam. But you can do that in love and respect still. And so, they deserve honor in that. And honor will look different in different times of life. Honor for a parent on his or her deathbed looks like caring for the parent even when it's difficult. Nursing homes aren't wrong. It's not wrong to put someone in a nursing home. It's not abandoning someone by saying the best care they can get is by being in a nursing home. But the toss them in them and never visit perspective, that's not honor. Putting him in the worst facility possible, that's not honor. I saw Dave Ramsey talk about that, of where it was like, how should we go about our money? Our parents are about to go into this. We like our money, we like our lifestyle. Should we just let them go into one of the state-run ones? And Dave Ramsey was like, those are terrible. If you love your parents, put them in one that actually is good. And that looks like honor. Sometimes it comes in of where you're looking at dealing with you spending your money to make sure that they're cared for. Dementia or Alzheimer's. I think this is a huge one in where we've seen it in our church. I've seen it in my family. Honoring a parent with that means not believing your parents' harmful words when they have that. Honoring is going, I'm just going to let that one flow by me. And go, they don't mean that. I'm going to trust who they truly are. Their mind is going. Honor for your parents when they're around retirement age or older could mean letting them move in with you. That's not a bad thing. And really, when we're looking about at the New Testament, it's very clear about the obligation of children taking care of, most especially, their widow's mother before seeking the church's help. 1 Timothy talks about this, where it's talking about widows. And it's, okay, what widows should the churches take care of? Well, the first question Paul says to ask is, do they have a child that could take care of them? The answer is yes. The church isn't to take care of that widow. The expectation's on the son. It's on the child to take care of their mom.
But what if they were like 10?
Scripture gives the caveat of if they're then incapable, the church comes on to help.
Okay.
And so, but with that it's first, and we quote the passage a lot, the man who does not take care of his family, he's worse than an unbeliever. Everyone quotes that about taking care of your wife and your children. That's not the primary application of that. It's taking care of your widowed mother. It's a primary application of that. So honoring looks like taking care of them. Again, it doesn't matter if they've lived a dishonorable life. If there are safety reasons why they can't move in, things like that, caveats, I'm not putting a burden on you. but you might have had a bad relationship with your parents. It might have been rough the entire time. Honoring them still looks like caring for them in that way. Honoring your parents when you're in more your middle life. And so some of us are going into that. Some of us are a little bit past that. It's looking for their advice. It's asking them. I'm trying to make sure that Ashley and my finances are in good order, so that way when we retire, we have enough, and not only just to be able to live ourselves, but to be able to give an inheritance to our children's children, as Proverbs says a good man does. I talked to my dad a lot about that. I called him, and I've had a lot of conversations with my dad because my dad handled his finances really well, and I asked a lot of questions about mutual funds and stocks and things like that. Of, hey, how do these things work? I talked to my mom. I was like, hey, what's the most prudent thing for me to do currently so my money goes the furthest? And so that's just involved there. Of honoring your parents means seeking them out for advice. Honoring your parents when they are new grandparents is allowing them to have access to your children. Another trend that's happening in our culture today of I'm not letting my mother-in-law have any access to my kids. It's ridiculous. Now, where safety concerns exist, again, there's a caveat there, obviously that. But this idea of I'm not going to let the grandparents around ever, my kid, my life, all those things, that's not honoring. Safety matters, but there does come a point where it's like, no, we should have, honor is allowing grandparents to be a part of those big moments, being a part of those things. Honor is there. And really, like this common trend is because of interpersonal conflict. It's not honoring. Honoring your parent as newlywed, and then even as someone who's been married for a while, means you're now obligated to honor your in-laws. You can't. You don't just get. It's not just for your parents, and then you can dishonor your in-laws. You're one flesh now. The command to honor parents goes both ways. I have to honor her mom and her dad, who's passed away, but can still show honor to him even though he has passed. And she has to show honor to my parents. That's how that looks like. And all this, they're deserving of the same honor as your own parents. Then honoring your parents as someone newly out of the house. Alyssa, you're going into your freshman year of high school, 4 years. And then culture says you're out. You go off on your own.
Well, she's already said she's living with me forever.
Well, that's good too.
That was going to be one of my questions is, where does it say to honor your parents when they tell you to get out?
Well, with them, because the opposite direction is more common, honoring your parents means keeping in contact with them.
Technically, I'm still in
Yes.
contact.
But there will be a day when you're out on your own and you don't want to call your parents. Now, I will say I'm kind of the opposite direction, because there was a day when I called my mom 6 times. It was the same issue, like multiple times. I was just trying to figure out the issue, and I needed her help on it. And on the 6th call, she went, "Stop calling me." And I like telling that story because I went, everyone else, the moms complain about their children not calling, and I get my mom telling me stop calling. But no, honoring your parents means keeping in contact with them. It means it means staying in touch no matter what's going on in life, and you taking the responsibility of that. It should not always be on the parent to keep in touch with their children. The children should have that emphasis. That's what honor looks like. I would add in another thing. If your parents still financially support you, some of you, that's not your world, but if that still is your world, You ought to spend your money in a way that honors them. I knew a lot of guys in college who their parents still funded their life, which is fine. My parents funded my life for a very long time. To some extent, I still work for my parents with Date the Word, to where there's an extent to where they're still helping me and Ashley out financially that way. I work for the money, but still there. There's nothing wrong with that. The individualistic of once you're 18, you're completely dependent is foolish. Parents, take care of your kids as long as you can. If you're capable and they're working and they're trying and you don't have a reason to pull back, take care of your kids. But if that's there, spend the money in a way that honors them. I saw it with so many college students of where it's like they would spend, like their parents would send them a certain amount of money each month into their bank account for food, books, and things like that, and they would buy the stupidest things. And I'm like, that's not even your money. Stop that. You need to spend money in a way where it is honoring to the parents. And actually, I would say that's a good philosophy, even when it's your own money. Even when your parents have nothing, because your parents have done so much for you, they've spent so much money on you. Do you guys know the average cost it is to raise a child today?
Too much.
It's like in 6 figures of birth to 18. Actually, I think it might even be getting close to 7 figures and some. Now, with it, high end, some parents end up being a little bit ridiculous on what they spend on their kids, and that's why the money ends up being so expensive, so high. But on average, it's not cheap. Parents spend a good chunk of change raising children. So even then, you should think that way of, would this honor them? Now, that's not a burden. That's not binding that's not saying you have to run everything by your parents, but there should just generally be a thought of, is this an honoring thing to do? And so I would add in as well in this, remember you're bearing their name or representing them in some way. I have a weird experience in life of everywhere I go, someone knows my dad. He was campus pastor at Liberty, and so literally my entire life, I go anywhere, someone knows my dad. I'm very cognizant of that fact of what I do and what I say represents him. Now, sometimes I do things that I don't know if my dad necessarily would do the same thing. And my dad is not trying to control my life in any way. But if I ever have that moment where it's like, hey, I'm doing something that someone might disagree with and it might come back to you, my dad, like, I tell my dad that. And I'm like, hey, just so you know, this might happen. I don't expect you to defend me on that. That's keeping in mind. I think that's just anything. There's people who know your parents. Even today, some of you, your parents may have been long passed on. There's someone who knew your parents, and they might go, what they're doing lining up with how I know they would raise them, how their parents would raise them. That matters. You should care about that. And then your parents might be the dishonorable type. They didn't raise you well. You should make them look better by living a good life, so that way people could go and say, well, maybe they were raised well. And that's a good way to honor. I would conclude by saying, in our culture, the greatest way to honor your parents is how you speak to them and about them. The main way I find many people dishonor their parents is by always focusing on the negatives about them, refusing to forgive, and then speaking to them as if they didn't raise you. I think a great application of this, and this is if your parents are still with us or they've passed on, is always speak well of them. Don't tarnish their character. Sometimes there may be certain people where you can have real conversations and be able to talk about stuff, but generally speaking, speak well of your parents. That's a good thing. You should speak well of them, and then with that as well, your parents aren't perfect. No one's is. Forgive them. My dad would say that children go through 4 phases with their parents. They deify them. They idolize them. They demonize them. They utilize them. And then they humanize them. The pattern of children, the first thing, child's born. Parents are God. That's the best thing. It is life is dependent on them. They get older, they realize parents aren't God, but hero. Idol. That's their idol. That's their hero. And then at a certain point during the teenage years, you start demonizing your parents. You start treating them like they're the devil. Like they're the worst. Of how dare you? How could you? All those things. They're the worst person. And then you hit an age when you start utilizing them. That usually happens in the 20s when you're trying to figure life out and you start making the phone calls to your parents and going, how in the world do I do this? I've never filed taxes before. What in the world do I need to do? And you utilize them. And then and then a certain point in life, you humanize them. And you realize they're just human beings like I am, who make mistakes, who don't do everything perfectly, but try their best. The faster we can get to humanizing our parents and just going, you know what? I'm gonna forgive, I'm gonna love, I'm going to just recognize that they are people that they're people just like me. And I'm going to love them, respect them, and speak well of them. I think there can, if your parents are still alive, sometimes you have to have conversations with people of they're doing this and that frustrates me. Once your parents have passed on, there's really no reason to speak ill of them. Few situations, some extreme things to where you need to just talk out and deal with emotions and things like that. But for the most part, honestly, the people who their entire personality is, I'm just going to be mad at my parents all the time, is just exhausting. I saw it in college. It's very popular for people that they get tons of followers from doing it. Just don't be a part of it. Honor your parents, speak well of them. So, any thoughts or questions on that? The answer to your question is, if you feel like she's at a place where she's ready to go, send her out. She'll get married.
Bye, Alyssa.
Hey.
She's not but 13.
She go live with Nana.
Okay.
I would say, generally speaking, the time when you should send them out on their own is once they get married. And then even then, help them out. I hope that Ashley and I, when we have kids and when they're old, we can help them because my parents have helped us. I have no shame in that as well. Y'all, literally, I do this all the time. I worked with people where I'd have a new pair of shoes and a coworker or my boss would say, oh, that's a nice pair of shoes. Just right off my tongue and go, my mom bought them for me. And they'd make fun of me. It was like, you don't have to tell it. Like, every time your mom's done something good for you. And I was like, I feel like I do. I want to celebrate my parents. I have no shame in any of the things. My parents are wonderful people that care. They're not perfect. I can tell you all their faults, but they are people that I want to celebrate. I want other people to think well of. I want to protect their character as much as possible. And yes, sometimes I disagree with them. Yes, sometimes we butt heads. I'm a Carson. That means we're all stubborn and think we're right. And that's okay.
I'm sorry, you're done.
I'm being beat up
I think
today.
I'm fitting in pretty well. I'm
Got
stubborn.
her own.
And so, but I'm you'll never hear. I love having my dad preach here. I think that's a great thing. I've been told by some of you, my dad and I preach very differently. I would, if you just isolated my dad's preaching style from my dad, I'd tell you a billion reasons why I don't think it's the best way to preach. I love my dad. I think he's a great preacher. And I think you'll never, I pray and hope, and if you ever do hear me to tarnish my parents, there's either something that's gone really bad with them or really bad with me. And I think generally we should just speak well of our parents, and we should celebrate them. Tell people the great things, because your parents 100% sacrificed for you. They've done something. They might not have sacrificed as much as they could have, but they definitely have. Every parent has. So, any thoughts or questions? Fears, woes, worries?
I think, at least coming from a spiritual standpoint, honoring them in a way to where you have their example that you can remember and live by and learn from.
Yeah.
And actually carry that on, because in some ways that's a legacy that you can keep.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because I mean, I take that from Alan's not in here, but my grandma
Mm-hmm.
and the things that she taught us and how she lived and how we've taken parts of that and continue that on, and as a way of honoring her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say applies to grandparents. And then I would add on, just on the spiritual side, if you have lost parents, lost grandparents, the best way to honor is share the gospel. You should want to spend eternity with your parents. You should want to spend eternity so much with your parents that you're willing to let them yell and scream at you about how they don't want to accept the gospel. If that's your relationship with your parents, because I know people who that's their relationship with their parents, of their parents are hardened, of they're not going to receive the gospel, share the gospel with them anyways. Honor them by loving them enough to want to spend eternity with them. But yes, absolutely, having that example, keeping it, and then holding on to the good examples, and then just forgetting the bad stuff. Any other thoughts, questions, fears, woes, worries? All right. Well, this is a fun one. We're continuing on. Just so you guys know, after we finish the 10 Commandments, we're going into a study of the Apostles' Creed, and that was requested by Jennifer. So if you want something taught on, if you request it, I will certainly think about it. And I may even teach on it. So just let me know if you'd like to. Let me know if you would, if you have anything specific you'd like to teach on. If you'd like me to teach on, not you, me to teach on, anything like that. And I'd love to look into doing it. If also you're like, hey, I don't have something specific, but I kind of would like something more practical, or I'd like something more theological. I try and balance it out as best as I can. I want to kind of go back and forth for Sunday evenings on something more practical, 10 Commandments, very practical, then something theological, something a little bit more practical, theological, going back and forth. But you guys can just let me know on that, and I will gladly think about it, and we'll try and do it at least. I'll do my best to try, because I want this time to be beneficial for you all. So, but if there's no other thoughts, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you so much that we get to spend time together talking about your word and what you expect of us. Lord, we do ask that we would obey this command. Lord, let us honor our parents, for they are worthy of it. We love you, Lord, in your Son's holy and precious name. Amen.